Our speaker, Mike Trujillo, his job title that he put on his little bio is Experienced Job Hunter. I've known him for a long time. I've been impressed with him for a long time because he is a major volunteer with Product Camp, which is every 6 months they have a wonderful presentation for Product Camp. People make presentations. They're always great. We've gotten wonderful speakers from Product Camp, and I'm sure that he will not disappoint today. He has held numerous jobs throughout his career. His specialty is product management and helping businesses to build and grow new teams. Starting in the 8th grade, he was recognized by his customers and awarded Paperboy of the Month by his local newspaper. He has been working hard, providing outstanding products and services to his customers ever since. He is also a frequent visitor to Launchpad Job Club, and he is going to share his perspectives about the confusing world of searching for roles in the Austin area. His original title that he told me is, "Why is it so damn hard to find a job in Austin?" But he has cleaned that up, and now it's called The Kinky World of Job Searching in ATX. Mike Trujillo.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Oh, wow, there you go. How many of you are in the software tech spaces? Anything in software? Okay. How about government? We had a couple government people here. I saw operational and logistics type of people. Healthcare, any healthcare people? You? Am I missing some? Are there other, what are you? Oh, education, of course, education. A lot of educators here. Finance. The reason why I'm asking is so this original talk was actually for product managers, and I've had to kind of make it very generic, and I think it's going to apply to all of us. But while we're going through it, I just, some of my examples, don't take pictures, I'll explain why. PowerPoint, take a picture of that. If you have a really smart camera, this should take you to a website, and do that now. Get your presentations now. So bookmark it, take a look at it. You can follow along, skip ahead on the slides. I'll wait. I feel like a celebrity. Actually, yes. Okay. The other thing that was really exciting so I've been coming here a lot, and I'm usually sitting right where you're sitting, right there. That's my seat when I'm normally here. And I got to be a speaker. I was very honored to be here. Well, it turns out they actually have a special parking space just for me. This is awesome. So if you get a chance to speak, just to get a good parking spot, that alone is worth it. Everyone ready? We still have another camera up. Okay, all right. So let me introduce myself. And the reason why I mentioned this, I love this intro because I was on a job, I was interviewing at a job, and most people there were much younger. And it was interesting in the person I was looking at their bio, and they had listed on their LinkedIn page, they got the Top Performer of the Month award for their company. And I thought, well, gee, I got an award like that when I was a kid, and I've been trying to figure out how to pop that into my bio. And this is actually from the newspaper. I found it online. I might have it somewhere in my house, but you can't really read this very well. But it lists like my home address, my age, and things you would never do to a 13-year-old ever. Where I go to school, where my paper route was, Short of having my social security on there, I mean, there was like a lot of things you wouldn't do today. But that was way back in the day. But what's important about this is that I'm not going to pretend I have an answer to anything you're doing. All this is an opportunity for us to talk about the things that we're bumping into, be honest about it, and to maybe even kind of be interactive. How long do I have? Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. If this gets boring, I can tell you're going to show me that you're bored. So when it starts getting boring, I'll accelerate. But as long as you're interacting with me, we'll keep this going. So the idea of this is not necessarily have the magic answer. I'm not even working right now, which I find the irony. I'm talking to a job club, but I'm not even working right now. But I'm going to be giving you advice. Just think of that, right? So. What I'd like to do is explain, and even though you may not working in a technology space, technology hits every single one of us. Education, you're getting reamed by technology. There's a ton of online classes right now available for all sorts of certifications. If you're into logistics has changed significantly over the years. Used to think that, delivery stuff wasn't going to be important, but now how many boxes show up on your doorstep every day? right? And becomes an extremely important part of every business. All of our businesses are going to be changing. So I'm going to look at Austin, at the Austin area, just to give you a, Boston's been here for a long time, to understand what does that technology mean. And we're going to spin that back into a job and understand a little bit about what this Kinky thing is. So I have these, and now I'm not really talking about sex, by the way. If you're expecting any discussion about Kinky sex, all I'm going to say is the word sadist and masochist, that's it. But the sadists in these are the companies. These are the people that are inflicting heavy damage on us by, if you've seen some of these job descriptions, I'm going to show you one a little bit later. They get like super, super long for no apparent reason. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to be the masochists in this model. A lot of us have a tremendous amount of experience in lots of different areas. And we have to figure out how to weave all that into a story that makes sense for that. So we're kind of twisting and being the masochists. And then I have these safe words, which is just how to escape out of that discussion. And then Q&A. And again, along the way, we'll do some interaction. I might ask some questions. So to get you inspired, I love some of these quotes. Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom. Do you feel like you're hitting bottom right now? No, not yet? I was at a job club one day, and I saw some guy sitting in the chair, and his head was down like, oh, sorry. His head was down like this, and he was like as low as it can go. And I think one of the important things in these clubs is that we have to lift each other up. And I think it's important that maybe we're not in that spot, but people around us are. And so I want to make sure that you understand that it sucks to be out of job in this town. In a town that has so much opportunity, it really sucks. So you've got to really figure out how you're going to bounce out of it. And then the other thing is, even though we can blame a lot of things, we have to also be really blaming ourselves. We have to look very carefully at what we're doing in this process to get a really better grounding. Again, if you're in a low spot, and I've talked to a couple of my friends that are really, really, depressed, and they're looking for jobs, guess what? That shows up the moment you show up at the job interview. I had a friend who I introduced. I was a guy that was looking for a job, and I introduced him to one of my best friends. Looked like a perfect fit. Well, they ended up talking about his wife and his sickness and all the problems he was having, and he just never, the one looking for the job, dumped too much stuff out, and it just didn't work out. So you've got to be in a good, healthy spot when you're looking for work as well. Let's skip to go over one. You can download it later. But let's talk a little about the history. Who recognized? Just raise your hand. Who recognizes this? This is my age test. Okay, so those of you who don't recognize it, it's called, I forget the exact term, I have a, well, it's from the IBM Selectric typewriter, introduced in 1967, manufactured here in Austin. Selectric typewriters were the rage in business, and what was nice about them is you can type super fast on them, and if you were the old typewriters where these arms are flipping over, if you went too fast, you get arms that would hit, and you couldn't keep going. So these things were designed so you can go super fast. You can actually lift them up and pull it in a different font, which you can't do with the typewriter. You can actually take another ball out. They called them golf balls or what other names for them, but these went on these little typewriters, and it was quite amazing. So in 1967, we are now a technology company. And this is where technology starts. You should recognize this, but this is Motorola comes in the mid-70s. They're expanding in Arizona. They open up and they've got 4 or 5 plants. I heard Qualcomm. Some people have intersected with that company along the way. But we start the reign of hardware, and hardware ruled this town. I came in, I was working in Dallas at the time for a semiconductor company. I've been in electrical engineering for a long time. I came into Austin in the mid-80s and the 90s, and it was still kind of a hardware-ish town. There were still semiconductors ruled. But 1980, the exact year, I think it's 84 or 85, there's a guy named Michael Dell who starts out this little business out of his dorm room. And then we become the big hardware company. And we become a big hardware. And these become the anchor companies. When you came into town, you either worked for Motorola or A&D or Dell. And for the longest time, that's where these companies live. Then in the 90s, a software company named Tivoli comes out, and they go public and make a ton of money, and they end up getting acquired by IBM. But we come in the reign of software, and one of the major investors in Tivoli is a company called Austin Ventures. And Austin Ventures now has a bunch of money, and they now are continuing to invest, not so much in semiconductor companies that are doing it, but they're also now investing in software. We're now starting to see in the 90s and the 2000s the city changing dynamics from a hardware-centric place into software. Well, Austin Ventures is not a thing anymore, but in the 90s and in the early 2000s, they ruled. If you were a startup company and you weren't talking to Austin Ventures, you were no one. Now it's not even it's a blip. What's happening now, if you're familiar with Capital Factory, it's basically, we've become a community of small little community businesses that have a nice little model to go through. And Capital Factory is the place to start your business. They'll give you an office, they hook you up with a mentor. All you have to do is have an idea and a pulse, and pretty much you can get in and get started. You have a tremendous amount of resources to start an idea. And the challenge is, if you hang around with that community, you're going to find almost every MBA student coming out of Macomb School going off and wanting to start their business. And that's what's happening. What's happening across this time now is that the company profiles are getting smaller, getting younger, and the technology is continuing to evolve. When you were in semiconductors, you probably experienced this. Were you a microprocessor or a memory, or were you an analog? Or what kind of analog were you? There's different specialties along the way. Each time we go through these generational changes, you find these little spaces. What ends up happening is you get yourself and you get into really something that's super hot. We talked about data. Who was the data analytics person? Someone, data science. Right, that's super hot right now. But I guarantee you, right, that you're going to fit yourself in a box in a couple of years. There's a lot of specialties in data science, tremendous amount of specialties. And just being in it isn't enough. You have to understand those specialties. You have to understand. We'll talk a little bit more about what we'll call tribes later. So when you're looking for a job, this is where we get into what I call the Kinky diagram. This is the diagram that when you get into a job, you're going to get pulled in 100 million different directions. Now, this might be specific to technology, but I guarantee you this is something you can relate to in every single one of your jobs. If your job description is longer than 5-6 bullet lines, and it gets into pages, and you have to print it out multiple pages, that's what's happening. You're getting pulled in different directions. You're going to break into those pages. Now I'm picking on product management mainly because a lot of people, how many people want to, are in, desire to be anything related to product or project management? Why you see that is a lot of us, when we've been in technology businesses for a long time, or any kind of business, we're at the point where we want to go off and lead. And these become ideal roles for us. We are, most of us are parents. We know how to lead, a group of kids through a mall or run a soccer team. And those kind of skills really help with some of the jobs. One of the online classes called Product School has this breakdown of what a typical product management job is. In the case of, and they actually break it down into percentages, 40% of your job is communication. It's that ability to work through problems, that ability to deal with crap that normally people don't know how to deal with. You're a diplomat, you're a motivator, you're a conductor. The communication skills are significant, probably the most significant part of the job. They put around 40% of the job. Understanding the business, understanding how to test the business, how to make common sense decisions around the business is another 20%. Some aspect of understanding your user, whether you're in a software business or anything that's involving a product or a service you're giving to a customer, you need to understand your customers. You need to be an advocate for the rest of the team. You need to understand how things work. If you're in operations, right, and you're a manager, you recognize there's a ton of people that are impacted by it. How good are the rules? How good are the safety? What are the other things you have to worry about in the business? You have to be an advocate for that. In this town, also, technology is an important part. There, it's more not necessarily being a coder, but understanding, being able to, at a high level, understand you're dealing with a big bunch of stuff. Whether it's software, in our case, it's managing code, but if it's any other space, there's a technology that comes to most of our businesses, and we didn't understand how that impacts our product. So in a perfect world, the ideal job description should be like this. 40% of the question should be on communication and 20% on these other things. But the reality is, it's not. The reality of this town is they tend to put a lot of emphasis on technology. You'll see a lot of technology questions in your jobs, even if you're not really doing development roles, even you're not in engineering roles. You see in product management, you'll see in logistics, there's certain technologies that are extremely important that you understand and grasp, and these become the big questions that you ask. That little communication thing has gotten very little. And I'll give you an example of how little it can be in a job description. But that ability to have to do all the communication is quite small. What they've done is they've added a bunch of other crap onto those resumes that are important. I'm going to break these things up a little bit. So let me skip over this slide and go right into it. So the first one is the industry. So I saw someone in here that was in business banking. Who was the Q2 person? Was it Q2? So fintech is huge. It's super white hot. How long have you been out? How long have you been out of the job market? 3.5 years. So even though you have that background, you recognize a lot has happened in 3.5 years. As white hot is as the fintech, they call it now, industry is. Your last position, meaning the last 3 months, should equal, and I have a bunch of equal signs to the applied position you have. So if you're going after jobs in areas that have a lot of these niches, you want to be data science, you want to be in software, you want to be whatever, you have to make sure you understand this is extremely important. It doesn't mean you're not going to get the job, but it means you have to be very thoughtful about your resume or what you're going to do for it. So for instance, you have to make it look like the last, everything you've done has been built around that industry. There's other techniques, we're not going to go on all of them in this meeting, but the industry is very important. And there becomes also this, we'll talk about tribe a little bit later, but there's a prejudice towards it. When I worked in semiconductors, man, I'll tell you, you could be a salesperson in semiconductors if you weren't a double E. A salesperson does not need to have an electrical engineering background to be successful, but for the longest time, especially when I was first in, we demanded, I joked around it, but it seemed like even the admins in the office had to have an electrical engineering degree to be successful. That was the attitude, because all the managers and everything that we did was top-down double E's through the whole thing, and so that was kind of what your thought would be, that you had to be that degree to be successful. And that's true in all the industries we're looking at now. Every industry you're looking at, they're looking at your image. I even saw a job description for, it was a writing software for iOS, which is the Apple operating system. And they wanted 10 years experience, even though the operating system had only been around for 5 years, right? And I'm not joking, that was in the job description. But there's like this mentality that you've got to have these long, deep connections to it, which is BS. The other thing is that you've got to look for what I'll call the last prompt, right? It's not unusual for you to get into a job and you have all these weird questions that are coming into you 4 or 5 times. I had this one job I interviewed with, and they asked me about roadmaps 5 times. Every single person asked me about roadmaps. It didn't dawn on me until later that they are evidently having problems with roadmaps. The last person that was in the role wasn't successful at doing roadmaps. And that became a thing. And so sometimes you can figure it out in the job description, something out of the ordinary. Sometimes you don't discover it until you're actually there. But this is a big problem, and a lot of times what they do is they keep adding on to the job description because that's the problem. So I need someone who can fix that problem. The other thing is being modern. So often, like I work in software, agile is the word. You know what agile is. If you don't worry about it. It's a piece of buzzword. Well, unless you're an employer, it's very important. But even knowing what it means, right, you have to understand that over time, that has changed. Operations, right, has changed significantly over the last couple of years, and if you're referencing word and terminology that's 10 years old, no. You go back to your resume that's 10 years, your job description you did 10 years ago, and you modernize all those words. You have to be modern. You have to make sure that the skills and the things that you're doing are relevant to the job today. It's modern. So be very, very careful about modern. And that you need to make it look like Agile has different religions. A lot of us have different religions and are in a specific technology or a specific talent that we may have. So be aware of where they are. Agile is a religion. And I mean, there are people that, we'll pick on religion for a while, but if you go to a Baptist, you got to know that they don't dance, right? I mean, that's the thing for Baptists. No offense to Baptists, I'm a Methodist. We just do cover dishes at all of our things. So, but each of our religions have these little quirks and things about them you just have to know. That's the same thing here. That when you're getting into understanding the businesses that you're going after, the skills you're going after, make sure you understand the slight religious slants that are particularly good at. You can find those often in the job descriptions and some of the things that they do in public sector. In tribes. This one is super, super big. The biggest tribe that we think of is age. That's the first one. My attitude about tribe is this one up over here. is if I go to a website and see everyone in the same color t-shirt, playing foosball or doing something with a little prop going on, I'm going like, I look for a gray hair in there. I look for something that indicates that I might have a chance to work there. Other tribes, I work in software, and open source is a huge tribe, and so you'll see people with really strong attitudes about, well, if you're in a Microsoft space, you can't possibly understand my world of software, and therefore they're looking for, there's a different kind of tribe that comes with that. Some of the companies have like these weird policies they love, like, endless vacation, bring your dogs to things, and some of them are still the younger group, but there's different things about an organization you need to know about going into it. I'm not saying this is bad stuff, I'm just saying be aware. You're doing something. What? You want to pet the dog? I think of poop when I see this, but that's just me. A common problem, and again, I'm a guy, so I don't see it as much, but it's not unusual when you look at the management team, look for the women. Is there a woman on that management team that is, But is there anyone that's in a real leadership role? Because often the women are in these roles where they're in a different kind of leadership role. I'm not minimizing the roles, but they're not the CEO. Now, WP Engine's a good example of Heather. Her last name is the CEO of WP Engine. Reiner, very good. And Brenner. And so that's a company that I thought, well, okay, if there's a woman in the company, diversity is more important. Diversity doesn't just mean women, females, races. It can also mean age. If you're looking at places that actually be more mindful about the kind of company you're going into, to recognize that tribes exist in different ways. The other one I want to pick on a little bit is, no offense to UT people, but when you start looking at the board of being like all MBAs, Macomb School MBAs, right? That's a different kind of tribe. So if you're going in and you don't have the Macomb, you Macomb? Oh no, you're not the student. Who's the student? There's a student here. Was there a master's student here? No? Okay. Not picking MBAs today. But the idea is that the school, sometimes the school, being, if it's all UT based or all Texas based, there's different kinds of tribes that go along with it. Not that you have to, adapt to it, just be aware of it. That's part of your strategy building. Now we're going to pick on this communication thing. So I mentioned before that communication is by far the biggest thing out there with respect to most of our jobs. Our ability, especially as we're getting older and we're now in a leadership role, it becomes the biggest thing. But you'll notice a lot of times in resumes, they're basically looking to see if you're a people person. And a lot of times, in my opinion, this is written by an engineer who doesn't understand what it means to really be in a communication role. They'll ask you things like, do you know PowerPoint and Word? Can you write? Again, that doesn't mean you're good in communication. And also, it's also very, very difficult for us to demonstrate our abilities. I could show them, this video and say, look, I can talk, right? But it's not something you're going to sit down and watch 45 minutes of me talking. So the problem you're going to deal with, and this is something you have to look at very carefully, because this is such an important part, and this is where the biggest disparity is start really thinking about ways you're going to demonstrate your communication. Have writing samples, put them in your LinkedIn profiles, focus on major wins in your resumes and other communication jobs that involve communication. If you blog, I'll confess I had a really bad interview about a year ago, and I had the job. I had it nailed, and it was a roadmap question that hit me. And I second guessed myself, and I kind of lost my voice. And right after it, I started the blog. I joined Product Camp. I'm now on the board of directors at Product Camp. I've decided that I'm not trying to be young, but I realized I was a big guy and I lost about 35 pounds after that. I tried to change me as a result of it. And I think one of the things you're going to look at as you're trying to transform a little bit, you've got to be aware of who you are as a person. Anyway, why I mention this is that there's a great ways that you can get your voice out, different ways to express yourself if you want to, if you feel that's a part of what you need to go off and do. You can blog about anything, really. It doesn't have to be around your job thing, but if you find a voice that helps you, I think, connect about who you are as a person and get you more confidence, so the next time you're interviewing, it's you. You're not just fitting into a mold of someone that they're envisioning. It's actually genuine you. So a couple quick takeaways. I thought I'd take this slide. So again, some quick takeaways on this, and we'll get into more interaction on this in a moment. So remember, the Austin has a history of emphasizing technology. And technology people are sometimes writing job requirements, and they don't understand the essence of people part of the jobs. So if you're in a pure engineering role, and I think there's a few of you here, but not all of them pure engineering roles, you'll find a lot of that pure engineering influence is part of the job description. The other thing is that I think the criteria that's used to hire people are not the same thing of them to be successful, right? It's so often, now you look at those 4 big things you look at, well, when you get into the biggest part, the communication part, the hard to demonstrate, but they're going to focus a lot more on the last problem question. That's why I had 5 roadmap questions. They're going to look for technical talent and ask me a bunch of weird technical questions to see how talented I am. But the big things they're really worried about, they don't know how to test for it. And the problem is then when I go into that role, or anyone's going into that role, you're not being screened accordingly for the things that need to be really successful. And the other thing is that we have these continual waves of technology. I'm not just saying hardware, software. I'm not just saying, semiconductors to computers, but I'm saying to specific little niches, right? Even if you're in big data, it goes from a particular module of big data to another module of big data. And so what this ends up doing is it starts putting you into boxes. And the problem with being in a box is it's really hard to break out. And if you've been in a box and you've been out of that box for a while, it's basically the same thing, right? It's very difficult to break out of a box. So let's start off with people that are trying to break into a job that has nothing to do with them. So if you've started, there was a few people that wanted to be product managers that aren't product managers right now. Was there someone like that here? A couple of you. Were some of you looking to pivot in some way? Pivot into another job? I heard a couple of people talk that they actually are looking to do new things. What were you guys looking to do?
More digital.
Okay.
I think product management is something that I thought about that I might for education.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm a semiconductor, but I'm a mechanical engineering degree. Therefore,
You're doomed. Sorry. If you didn't hear that, he's a mechanical engineer in the semiconductor space. That's packaging. You're doomed. I'm sorry.
I started in packaging, then I went into wafer fab. And so there are actually job postings right now from Samsung where the jobs I was doing, they now want a master's or PhD in electrical engineering.
Right. But we're losing jobs. We're losing jobs to younger people. We're losing jobs to artificial intelligence. We're losing jobs in different ways. But we still have one of these things. And that's important to really understand. But if you're trying to break into a new space, this could be someone that is younger, just coming out of school and trying to break in. Product management is a really good example where despite Michael Brown does these great things in training you and giving you certifications, the challenge is even if you have certifications in certain spaces, it doesn't guarantee you a job. They want to demonstrate that you can do things. That's part of understanding a little bit more of those dynamics. So you have to prove yourself to employers in any kind of job you get into, especially when they're looking at 100 resumes for every job opening. Despite the fact that we have low unemployment, a lot of people are hopping jobs. Hopping jobs is so big here. It's unbelievable. So every job that's open, a good over half, probably 80% of the people that are applying for jobs already have a job. They're just looking to get a better job. So you're competing with a lot of people that are that have the experience, and that's part of one of the problems. So when you're trying to get into something, this is maybe, if you've got a thing you're wrestling with, this might be a good time to discuss it because you got plenty of time. I've had a lot of people who are trying to break into product management, and they're pick on that now. And that's really hot right now. It's a lot of online training. And what happens with product management is often people coming in will have an MBA or they'll have a degree in something. They don't know how to get into a product management role. What I recommend is getting to a company. If you get into a company that you like and admire that has those roles, that should be your first goal. If you can get in, if you have an experience, a degree in something that's relevant to that company, you can get in at any kind of role. There are these new roles called customer success. Has anyone heard of that role? Right? What is customer success?
Essentially, making sure that customers get the value out of the product
that you promise to them, but doing it in a way that you can track and leverage so you get more sales. So
Okay.
it's kind of a quasi-sales and support role.
It's a sales and support role, new buzzword for it. Anyone else have a different take on that?
Well, it depends on the company.
Exactly.
Every company defines that.
Exactly, right? So the point is that every company defines a lot of these roles very, very differently. There's a buzzword, it's nice to do it, but the nice thing about these roles, often, they're somewhat introductory. They're a sales-ish role. They don't know what to do with it, right? It's a new kind of role. And for some people, if you've got a business background, going into a sales role or a sales support role, sometimes it's called inside sales, sometimes it's called account management, has different terminology, but basically your job is to represent the company and make sure that that customer is happy as can be, and you're also providing feedback into the company. But it's not really a sales role, so it's in between, but it's called customer success. So there's different ways you can break into companies. But you have to be thinking about targeting particular places. Be mindful about what you're trying to do if you're trying to pivot. Pivoting is really hard. I was in semiconductors. I am so blessed that I pivot out of semiconductors, got into telecom, got into software. I mean, I made all these weird pivots by accident, but how I got out of semiconductors really was because I was working on the development tools, the software development tools. We did microprocessors and DSPs, and they all had development tools. Well, when I went to Nokia as in the software working with the software development tools. I was a product manager for development tools, and guess what? I'm working now for a mobile company. On a resume, I work for Nokia. It's a mobile company, even though I'm doing the exact same job I was doing in the semiconductor space, but now I'm working for a mobile company. Now I have mobile on my background. Now I'm picking up mobile jobs, even though I don't know what a mobile phone is. I don't. But the idea is that you're thinking about breaking in. If you get into a place, especially if you get into a role like customer success, is work your way into maybe a leadership role. You get attention that way. And there's this concept of shadowing, right? There's these other groups that are doing things that once you're in the company, if you're on a product team and you want to be in product management, they have daily stand-up meetings. They call them stand-ups or scrums. And if you can shadow those meetings, at least attend, you'll get a feel for what the things are. You're getting exposed to things. So there's different ways you might be able to break in if you're mindful about it. If your strategy is to get into those roles, be smart, be strategic. Think about what you've got. Think about the talents that you have. I'll be honest, I'm not going to hire you just because you want the job. I'm not going to hire you just because you've read a book about it. They're taking risks in hiring you. So unless they know you really well, you're going to have to be more strategic to break in. So for the people that want to break in, to go back to our Kinky theme, the safe word here is malleable. Think about being malleable if you want to break into something for the first time, and just kind of adapt along the way. Any thoughts or questions on this part? No? Are you bored yet? No? Okay, good. All right. I can speed this up. If you're stuck in a box, I'm stuck in a box. Most of us are getting stuck in a box. And we have a lot of skills and expertise. We're having a hard time leveraging a new space. Or with my case, and I'm sure a lot of you, I heard a lot of your stories, man, I've been in everything. And the problem is I've been in everything. And I've taken on so many different kinds of roles. To me, this is like perfect. I've got all this experience. Does it help? Not really. And so now we're also having problems with tribal issues. And this is hitting us in multiple areas, not just our age. Age is an important part, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it's also all this industry stuff, right? Unless you've been last job working in the industry with the right buzzwords, with the competition that they're familiar with and the job they're familiar with, you're not going to resonate very well with you. So a couple things to ponder. I put this, and I can give another talk about this whole thing later. But if you want to talk afterwards, I'll give you some of these ideas. First of all, just training up on new areas. That's important. Taking classes from Michael is a great example. Online classes, going to meetups, being around people that are in that space so you know a little bit more about that, about those areas, and not being afraid. Part of it is also fear. It's also knowing the people. I started going, I've been a product manager for a long time, but as I started going to product camp and the other product groups, my network in that space is built up an awful lot. And I'm more comfortable now because I know more people in that market. I have better connections and more meaningful connections in product management. And if you don't know about Product Camp, February 23rd, I don't have this in the slide, so if you want to do Product Camp, it's a full day Saturday. And what you do, it's a free event, it doesn't cost you a penny. And you come in, there are speakers, there's 25, basically there's a bunch of sessions all in parallel. There's 25 speakers, and it's the who's who in product management. If you want to get into product management, that's also product marketing, any kind of PM kind of roles is a great place to go. And it's at the Norris Centers up here. But productcampaustin.org is the site, and I highly recommend it. And then also, this one I could break a whole talk about is be the solution to someone else's problem. So what I've discovered at companies is often, especially as they're trying to solve problems, it's nice to know about those problems before you even apply. What I discovered with the roadmap people afterwards was the roadmap was a problem. Had I known this to be the problem before, I would have prepped it differently. What I did, and very successfully by the way, it was a friend of mine that introduced me to this company that was doing, basically it's a healthcare tracking system in a hospital. It's it's a communication platform in hospitals. And I found, I was applying for a product manager role, I found the ex-product manager on LinkedIn, the former product manager. I reached out and just said, hey, I'm looking at the company, would you mind spending some time with me on the phone? And they poured on the phone. They told me all the problems of the company. Next was I found some customers. And I reached out, I was careful with the customers, but I was getting feedback from different people about the company. And what I ended up doing was I put together a presentation that basically said this. I did a SWOT analysis. So you project management people, SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Their strengths, they were number one in their market. They had a strong reputation in their very small niche. Their weakness was their management team, especially their executive, liked running the company, and they could not do anything without change of directions almost weekly. And their management team was very old school. They were having a really hard time getting started. And I went through this whole thing. And I literally, in an interview with 6 people on a telephone, which is the worst place to do this, I can tell this was going nowhere very quickly. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, I took 15 minutes. I can take 15 minutes of your time. I prepared some things I think I can do for you. And I gave them these PowerPoints. And they were blown away. Now, I had to do a lot of work for that. But this thing was, I was the solution to someone's problem. Now, I actually got a job offer out of it. But the reality was, I recognized that I was not going to be the solution. They just hired me to be a PM, and I wasn't really there to fix the problem. And I knew I was not able to fix the problem. So I ended up passing on it. But the point was, the strategy was really an important strategy. It helped me get my voice, but it's also a neat way of breaking in. We'll talk a little bit more about these ideas, but we have to recognize that these areas are going to be our weaknesses. Our industry experience might be a little bit off. We're not as modern. So we have to work harder on these areas. We should nail this part of the job. We're experienced product managers, experienced operations people, experienced in our jobs that we've been doing for 10, 20 years. The basics are solid. We shouldn't even be questioned on that. If there's new stuff that we're having a hard time fitting with, we have to focus on those areas. We're going to digress just a little bit and talk about this. This chart blew me away. And this is people self-reporting their happiness on a scale of 1 to 10 by age. Where are you in that right now? I'm 57, so I'm like right on the bottom. I'm right towards the bottom. Does that say, what does that say to you right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And this is the average, this is people's average self-reporting happiness in their life, right? This is how they're reporting. What blows me away is you're 82 and you're off the charts, but that's a different thing. No judgment on 82-year-old people. But for a lot of us that are in this age group, I'm not judging your ages. I'm not saying you're all in this category. But we're in the pits right now. We're in the pits. Yes, sir. Okay, good. So you're rating yourself higher than what's in here. That's good. Relatively speaking. Well, but were you ever higher or lower? So it's all relative, right? You might have been even higher when you were 20. You know, notice that 20, they're not hitting on 10s either. So, but it's just an average score. And there's multiple reports that do this. I've seen the same trend. Suicide rate is also highest at this age, by the way. White males in this age group, highest suicide rate, right? That's where you are in your job search. And part of this, and this is why I mentioned this book, Chip Conley, I bumped into him. He had a LinkedIn page, and I don't have the link to the page. You can Google this. It's super easy. But this guy wrote this thing called, a book called Modern Elder. And Chip is, you may relate to him, you may not. Chip was successful, had a hotel, did really well, sold it off, and then he had some buddies or friends or acquaintances that are this little company called Airbnb. And all these people are 20 years younger than him, and they realized they needed help. They didn't really have expertise in this space, and they brought him on. And so his bosses are, the founders of Airbnb. And he has this concept called modern elder. So the elder, you think about an elder in society back in the caveman days, the elder was the wise person that passed wisdom on to the next generation. And as information is becoming more commoditized, the role of the elder is playing a different role. And you see now a lot of these companies now in this town, Silicon Valley, where a lot of the companies that are starting by 20 and 30-year-olds. The average age for a worker in the U.S. Is 42, but the average age of Facebook is 29. The average age of Apple, I think, is 31, and Google is 30, or vice versa. They're in their 30s, the average age in those companies. So recognizing where we are in this space. So this book, I just started reading it, but if you want to just get your head on a different space, be thinking about the opportunities that you have, this is a really good book. I'm just into the second chapter right now. But what he talks about is this idea that we can be, so a lot of companies, Uber, good example, CEO did really well, the company did really well. Well, the CEO, if you remember, got in a lot of trouble. The problem with the company is it was run by a bunch of young people that didn't understand what it meant to run them into a business. And so they're bringing on older people. And you're starting to see Silicon Valley being deliberate about reaching out to people that have more experience. We have a better view about things. Our experiences are more diverse, which is a positive thing. And if we're thinking about this and we're thinking about the problems of the companies we're going into and thinking how to leverage that, that's what we need to be thinking about. It may not be the same job, right? I may not be a product manager. My job I'm looking at, I'd rather not be a product manager. But I still want to help and contribute to a company. And there's different ways I can do that. Maybe there's a business I want to pursue that helps in this space. Some of us go into training, some of us go into consulting. You see a lot of people, some people speaking that are consultants that have been through the way. So there's a different way to find your voice. This isn't in here, but I just want to talk about the concept. You don't need to read all this. But basically, what happens is technology companies are fearful about your digital intelligence. How many of you are tweet on a regular basis? Any tweets? Anyone tweet here? 3 people tweet, 4 people, 5. Not having an account, actually using it, actually tweeting. Okay, how many Instagram people? How many Facebook people? Okay, Facebook, right. So the point being is that, right, there's new technologies out all the time. My granddaughter has reference in my world right now. My granddaughter comes to me and she's talking about TikTok, right? And she knows all about TikTok. I know nothing about TikTok, but that's giant right? So our digital intelligence, as you get older, it's harder and harder to keep up, and we're also getting further away from the core of the new technology. Our digital intelligence is kind of feeling dumber and dumber. And that's why the attraction to younger people, because of the newer technologies. They're learning about data science. They're learning about Tableau, these other tools, these new things that are happening. You're learning about them. So they tend to want to focus on digital intelligence. But what companies really need is emotional intelligence. They need people who have a good view of the world, a bigger picture. Even if you're 35, right, you're already finding the fact that you're getting out of relevance, even at age 35, especially in this time. Blows you away, doesn't it? And the fact that you're going to be in this workforce a lot longer, and most of us will be working till our 80s and 90s because a lot of us have the money saved. So we're going to have 4 or 5 generations now in the workforce, which is unheard of. We're living longer. People are being more relevant in the early ages, and now you're seeing generations. You've got a huge generation of people that are in the workforce right now. And this book does a good job at addressing it. And I highly recommend you taking a look at it. The last one's for employers, and we don't get any, well, it's just employers. But the main thing with employers, if you get into that role, we need to recognize that we've got to get better at looking for people. We need to understand the tribe. This is a giant issue in a lot of companies. We need to also address some of the other problems in the resumes, in the job descriptions, to throw them out, and find better ways of connecting with better people. think that's all I have for now. So any thoughts, discussions, problems that you're having? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things you touched on three times is that an industry, to a hiring manager, the industry matters more than the want. One of the things that I talk to in operations professionals is that the industry is completely and totally irrelevant. You have to have HR, you have to have fundings, you have to have lights on, the curtains have to work, you have to have the industry. And so it's something to convey that prospective employers is very critical, right? For labor laws and for your other industries, and they go, so my last one was nonprofit, I say government, and they go, so, but not tech, so no.
So if you didn't hear that, the gist of this is that there can be certain jobs that you have. You can be an HR person, operations person, education, facilities, whatever it is, that understand all the basics of running a business and you know all the modern stuff, but you're not working in a specific industry. So if you're logistics and you're not working at the Amazon plant in St. Marcus, guess what? You're not the right kind of logistics we're looking for. And how do you break into that? So my personal opinion, it's the resume's not going to be it, right? So what you need to understand is that often the resume it's going through a group of people that are putting you through a machine, through an HR person that knows nothing about what you do. And that's the first person you have to please. So if you know the company, often if you start thinking about what company you want to go work for with operations. Oh, okay, well I know people there. Okay, so you reach out and you find people, and you reach out to them knowing that they know nothing about you, you're not asking for their job, and you sit down with them and have coffee. And all you're doing is you're spending 15, 20 minutes with them as close to their place as possible. You're paying for the coffee. You're not wasting their time. You honor their time. And I was successful. I was very successful getting into a company, a WP Engine, and that's how I broke into WP Engine. We didn't offer the job, but I broke into the right person who introduced me to the people that were there. And from there, you start breaking into more and more people. You start learning about their problems. You start recognizing the right solution for it, and you work your way towards the people that matter in the company. Now again, you can't change tribe, right? Tribe is a big problem. You can't change what people think about you relative to your experience. But if you can get those connections, you have a better chance of getting in. Now, if tribe is a big problem and they don't want to hire you, guess what? You shouldn't be there anyway, right? So there's that part of that catch-22 you have to work through. That's a good example of again, you only do this for the 4 or 5 companies you absolutely want to work for. You be deliberate about it. You be strategic. You try to reach out to as many people as you can. And the trick is away from the decision makers first. Find the people that are the periphery that you know, an admin that works there, or a friend that works there, or someone that on the outside, or an ex-worker that used to work there, and kind of work your way through that and not raise a lot of attention. A couple of weeks ago or months ago, there was a guy named Joel Holst, who was with Providence Partners. You know Joel? He gave a great talk on strategy of how you go about and you figure out, you're going to know the hiring manager. You find 3 people in that company that hit up the hiring manager and talk about you. And he did a great talk about the strategy to do it. One of them was involving faxing your resume to their HR office. That was one of his techniques, which was really, I thought, awesome. So that's another thing to be thinking about is being strategic, being smart. You've been around long enough to recognize the HR people and the recruiters suck. Yeah, not suck. Sorry if you're a recruiter. But that's not their job. Their job isn't to make you look good, right? Your job is you got to look good. They have a really tough job. They got 100 people applying, and they're not going to dig, 10 pages into your resume to find you to do the job. Yes, sir.
I think the question about whether we should focus on industry or a role, I think it's a key question, and it's true for product managers and maybe for developers as well. You need some specialization, but I just read an article that said if you're a product manager and you specialize in a certain thing, after a while you sort of become locked into that.
That's the box concept.
Right, exactly. So one of my challenges is what kind of companies do I want to target and what industries do I want to look at, and by broadening my perspective or not focusing so much on a specific type of product or industry, it kind of opens up my field of vision a little. Eventually you have to focus, but I think you be a little more flexible about your industry. If you have the skill set, you go ahead and say, I know you have the same type of problems that every other company has. You need to know your customer, figure out how to serve them in a way that's going to be profitable to you. And I mean, that's the essence of what profitable is.
Right. So I was a paper boy in the 8th grade. That has nothing to do with me today, right? So although I was a great paper boy in the 8th grade, it's not. It's not relevant. So the challenge he was talking about is this idea that when you're going after the companies, trying to stay in your lane, trying to stay in an industry is difficult because it continually evolves. And it's hard. So the nice thing about working at big companies is often they're always playing in those spaces. I was working consulting companies, and they tend to they're just getting into technologies that most companies have been in for a while. So sometimes if you're consulting, you can make those jumps. But if you're in certain kind of places like Motorola, like A&D, those are harder to break into sometimes. And the challenge you have is if you're in a box, right, how do you break out of that box? If you get into a point where you're so specialized and really, really good, you got to hope that that business stays around for a long time. If not, then you've got to start doing the job clubs. You've got to start doing the meetups. You've got to start looking at other things, maybe even offering. You have to be more purposeful with reaching the other areas and to connect with those other places. Build your networks. As your friends are leaving, they're going places. Where are they going, and can you follow them?